Hello everyone, today we will be discussing landmark Supreme Court cases. This is the vocabulary that we will be discussing today. Indigent is somebody who is poor or needy. Precedent is an earlier event that is regarded as an example or guide for similar circumstances. Ex post facto law means that it is a law that makes illegal an act that was legal when it was committed originally. Acquittal is the state of being released. A hung jury is a jury that cannot agree on a verdict. Counsel is just another word for attorney. Judicial review is review by the Supreme Court to see if an act was unconstitutional or constitutional or not. And the Code of Hammurabi we will be discussing now. The Code of Hammurabi occurred during the Old Babylonian period. It is an early example of a fundamental law regulating a government. This is one of the earliest forms of a constitution, and it has 282 laws. It is known for a common phrase, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth, meaning what you do to somebody else, that's going to be done to you. One of the most famous laws in the Code of Hammurabi is if a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. So I know that sounds kind of harsh, but this during the Babylonian period, this was a law that people lived under, and these codes, they're called law codes. Even though we don't have the same exact codes today, they still influence how our laws are set up. English common law is one of the most important influences on the American legal system. It emerged from the changing and centralizing powers of the king during the Middle Ages. This is where habeas corpus developed, and this is so important because they base other court cases on precedents, so earlier decisions. And this is where a jury of ordinary people without legal training decide on the facts of the case. This is how our court system is set up, and this is why English common law influences it. So we're going to be discussing really important landmark Supreme Court cases that we use as precedents. The first one is Marbury v. Madison. At the end of Adams' presidency, he nominated a number of people to serve as judges, and remember that the Senate had to approve them. Not all commissions were delivered, and Marbury did not become a judge. The Supreme Court ruled that without the commission, the appointment was not complete. The Supreme Court and other courts have the power to decide whether something is constitutional, and this is an example, and actually it established judicial review. The next court case is Plessy v. Ferguson. Homer Plessy, who is this man right here, he was jailed for sitting in the quote-unquote white car. Plessy's lawyer argued that the Separate Car Act violated the 13th and 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court interpreted that it was constitutional, meaning that it was allowed for public places to be segregated as long as it was quote-unquote equal. We know that it was not equal, but this is how they justified it. For example, it was okay to make black and white people ride on separate train cars. So this is called separate but equal, okay? So Plessy v. Ferguson said that segregation, as long as it was separate but equal, they said that in this case, they said that it was okay. But we're going to see this case will get overruled by this one, the Brown versus Board of Education case. So this little girl, Linda Brown, was denied access to one of Topeka's white schools. The school was closer to her, and it was less dangerous for her to go to the white school. Her father claimed that Topeka's racial segregation violated the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, which is the 14th Amendment, because the city's black and white schools were not equal to each other. So this case overruled Plessy v. Ferguson by saying it's unconstitutional for the government to have segregation in schools. It violated the 14th Amendment, and the court said separate schools for students of different races are not equal. Okay, so this overruled Plessy v. Ferguson. The next case is Gideon v. Wainwright. Clarence Earl Gideon was charged in a Florida state court with a felony, having broken into and entered a pool room with the intent to commit a misdemeanor offense. He appeared in court without a lawyer and requested one. According to Florida state law, however, an attorney may only be appointed to an indigent defendant in capital cases. Indigent means that, that he was not able to afford one. And Gideon winded up representing himself in trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. So he filed a habeas corpus. This is a petition, because he believes that he was wrongfully imprisoned. And after that, he was appointed a counsel, and then they retried his case, and then he was acquitted and let go on all charges. So a legal counsel must be provided for any person accused of a crime, even if they cannot afford one. Okay, so because of this case, all people must be provided a counsel if they cannot afford one. In 1963, Ernesto Miranda was arrested. Miranda was not informed of his rights prior to the police interrogation. During the 2-hour interrogation, Miranda allegedly confessed to committing the crimes. He was retried without confession and convicted. He was detained, and prior to police questioning, he was not informed of his rights. So detained criminal suspects must be informed of their constitutional right to an attorney and against self-incrimination, which is part of the Fifth Amendment. The police duty to give these warnings is compelled by the Constitution's, like I just said, Fifth Amendment. And these are the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand the rights I have just read to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to me? This case is Tinker versus Des Moines. John and Mary Beth Tinker wore black armbands to their school as a symbol of protest against American involvement in the Vietnam War. When school authorities asked the Tinkers to remove their armbands, they refused and they were suspended. And this court case basically said that it's unconstitutional to deny students the right to free speech at school unless the speech disrupts school's activities. And that deals with the First Amendment rights. Henry Galt deals with Jared Francis Galt, who was 15 years old at the time, and he was taken into custody for allegedly making an obscene phone call. Galt had previously been placed on probation. The police did not leave notice with his parents, who were at work when he was arrested. After proceedings before juvenile court, Galt was committed to the State Industrial School until he reached the age of 21. The court held that proceedings for juveniles had to comply with the requirements of the 14th Amendment, because even minors have the rights to equal rights. United States versus Nixon. In 1972, a security guard found burglars in the Democratic Party headquarters. Reporters connected Nixon to the break-in. There were audio tapes of the president discussing the break-in, and Nixon refused to turn in the tapes over to Congress. He said that he had, quote-unquote, executive privilege. He claimed that the president had the right to privileged communication that could not be looked at by any other branch of government. In July 1974, the Supreme Court decided Nixon must hand over the tape, and this means that no president is above the law. Hazelwood versus Kumeyer. In this case, The Spectrum, the school-sponsored newspaper of Hazelwood East High School, was written and edited by students. This happened in May 1983. Principal Reynolds found 2 of the articles in the issue to be inappropriate and ordered the pages to be withheld. Kathy Kumeyer and 2 other former Hazelwood East students brought the case to court. They said that, they had the right to publish this, but the court said school-sponsored activities and publications could be censored despite the guarantees of the First Amendment if the school deemed it to be inappropriate. The last case is Bush versus Gore. In 2000, the presidential election between Al Gore and George W. Bush. Bush was initially declared the winner by just a few hundred votes. Reports of widespread problems with ballots soon called the results into question. Gore's supporters sued the state of Florida for a recount. Bush's supporters sued to prevent it. Florida's election laws set for announcing the final results, so the recount had to be begun quickly if it was to be done at all. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, stated that the Supreme Court of Florida had violated the U.S. Constitution when it ordered the recount of only certain districts, so it violated the 14th Amendment.